Okay. Share my screen. Okay, so we saw yesterday a big chiddush that even if you have a worker who acts negligently and breaks your merchandise, there is a mitzvah to go beyond the letter of the law. And to do what? And say that even though I could charge my employee because he was negligent and he had no right to handle the goods in the way that he did, I could charge him for the breakage. But yet, he quoted a pasuk in Mishlei that says, no, go the path of the good, take the road of the good. And beyond that, let's say he wants compensation for the work he did that day, but he didn't fulfill what I had tasked him to do, which was to transport the item. Nonetheless, I still have another mitzvah to even pay him if I know that he's going to be destitute if he doesn't take home his paycheck.
Transported 500 pieces rather than one piece.
Exactly. He did not do the job he was hired to do. So the source for this is a Gemara in Bava Metzia. And I've quoted this Gemara, I think, not too long ago, I think in my Pirkei Avos shir. I may have done that. Let me share screen. Why can't I share the screen? Well, what am I doing wrong? Hold on, stop share, and then share my here. So it says as follows: Rabba bar Chanan tavru lehano shakoloi, that there was a group of porters, people who schleppers. Rabba bar Chanan was the balabayas, was the employer. He had hired people to transport a barrel of wine for him. Chavisa de chamra, shakol, and they broke the barrel in the course of transporting it. Shakol liglimayhu, so he took their cloaks as payment or as collateral for the payment. Asu amru Rav, they went and told Rav, we don't have a coat anymore. Amrule havlahu glimayhu, he said, give them their coats back. Amrle dina hachi. So Rabba bar Chanan says to Rav, is this the halacha? Amrle in. He said, yes, it is. In a sense, it is, because it says, Laman telech b'derech tovim. You shall always go in the path of the good. Yahiv lehu glimayhu. And so Rabba gave them, according to Rav's instructions, gave them back their coats. Amrule aniye anan, the tarchinan kuliyama, the kafinan veleslan midi. So they then complained to Rav, and they said, we are poor people. We work the entire day. We're hungry. We don't have anything to eat now. Amrle zil hava grayu. So Rav turns to Rabba bar Chanan and says, pay them for their day wages. Amrle dina hachi. And he said to him, is that the halacha? Amrle in v'orchos tzadikim tishma. Yes, it is, as the pasuk continues by saying that uphold the pathways of the righteous. Okay.
The word righteous.
It is. There's no question that it's tzedakah, but it's a tzedakah that is incumbent upon me more than on other people, right? So let's first take a look at the Imrei Yaakov, Bischar, that you had hired these people for their wages. And he says, V'davka b'poyel amrinan kain. This is only true when you're dealing with an employee who you've hired. Aval bistam mazik, but with any other person who damages your property, ein mitzvah limcholo, afilo lifnim mishuras adin. There is no mitzvah to forgive damage to your property, even if you want to go above and beyond the letter of the law. Why would you want to forgive damage to your property? I had a neighbor who twice backed out his car onto my car that was parked on the street. Twice he did it. Is there a mitzvah for me to be moichel that? I don't think so. Actually, was it, actually neither time it was my car. One time it was my wife's car. One time it was my son's car. And he's a nice man. He's a Jewish man. I know he didn't mean it, but I mean, come on. You gotta pay for the damage that you caused. There's no mitzvah for me to incur hundreds, if not thousands of dollars of loss because,
Even if he is.
well, I mean, I'm sure it would. Yeah, that's true. It's all dependent on the relationship, right? So that if someone damages my property, even if they're poor, they can work it off. We'll work out something. There's no mitzvah for me to be forgiving on damage to my property just because the person can't afford it. Sometimes you're actually doing the person a favor. Okay.
If you done after the first time, you might be more careful in the next two times.
Yeah. Right.
I guess there could be a question about accepting payment from him directly rather than going through the insurance, because that would save him a lot of money. You would be made whole. And
yeah, but your premiums would probably be raised if you go
I'm
through
saying
the
if he
insurance.
just paid you directly without reporting
Yeah.
the insurance,
Yeah.
then that might be a
Yes,
fine,
absolutely. Yeah, that's what happened in both instances. We got
then you're made whole and you're helping him out by not reporting.
right. That would be considered a chesed. Yeah. Okay. So, or let's say one of the examples is that he was walking on an uneven path when he shouldn't have been. He wanted to take a shortcut, and he trips. So the Imrei Yaakov says the reason why the Rav Shulchan Aruch addressed the case in that way is that avol im holach b'makom yashar v'nitkal lav posheyahu upatruhu mitzad hadin. He says if he's not walking in an irresponsible way, he was walking, he took all of the proper precautions, he wore all of the proper gear, and he walked on a road that he was assigned to walk on, and the object still drops out of his hands, then he's not called a posheya, he's not called negligent, and then he's exempt from pay. Gam im balabayas eno rotzalim cholo, even if the balabayas does not want to forgive payment, a worker, there is such a thing as an innocent mistake that a worker makes even when he took all of the proper precautions and was not negligent. In that situation, there is a certain amount of breakage that a person running a business has to tolerate, right? Let's say a person is running the sewing machine, right? And something breaks, but they weren't negligent. It just over the course of there's wear and tear on machinery and stuff like that. So if there was no negligence involved, but just an accident happens, an employer has no right to charge the employee for the repair or the damage. The employer does have a right to demand that the employee take an oath in front of Beis Din that he was not negligent. Now, what does that mean in modern terms? We don't impose oaths anymore. So that's not going to happen today. But I guess I would say that if you have delicate machinery and you have a particular employee that every few months when he's operating the machinery, it breaks down, right? Or you have a housekeeper that every time you replace the belt on the vacuum cleaner, she manages to get something stuck and causes it to get damaged, then you probably have an issue with this person who's not handling the machinery correctly or is breaking things down. A lot of times there's this idea of what's negligence is a gray area. She may be a person who just is difficult to educate. You know what I'm saying? So you have to do your best. Sometimes you just have to let someone go when they're just not competent, and there's no other choice. Okay.
table, there's nobody else would happen to, but say anything.
Yeah.
And this often happens sometimes with cleaning ladies. They won't say anything when they break anything. Maybe they're afraid of the repercussions. But,
Right.
Yeah. You know,
Happens all the time. Yeah. Mitzvah ala balabayas. There's a mitzvah for the balabayas to absorb the cost of the breakage. Kain hu shitas Rashi. He says this is Rashi's opinion. Aval ayin biurim divrei maschol sheratz shehevenu derach veharif v'od rishonim lo svir luhu kain. V'daitam dehecha shapoel pasha ba'avodaso ein shum mitzvah limcholo afilu lifnim mishuras hadin. There is, however, another opinion in the Rishonim that goes against what the Rav Shulchan Aruch is saying, because the Rav Shulchan Aruch is following Rashi's interpretation of the Gemara, that we're dealing with a single employee who acted negligently. But they learned the Gemara differently. Ve'im kofen al lifnim mishuras hadin, ayin mashkasafti leil simendalet sif yudchesu v'likutim sham. He says, as far as whether we can coerce a person to act above and beyond the letter of the law, I've already addressed this all the way back in chapter 4. We're now in chapter 11. So I think we saw varying opinions on that. But clearly, the Rishonim seem to learn that this is all lifnim mishuras hadin. But there is a machlokes, and Rav Stern brings this in this long piece over here. He says, first he ends up quoting the Gemara, like that we just read together. Upirish Rashi shakoloi no say masos. That Rashi learns that the word shakoloi in the Gemara means people who are schlepped, they're hired to schlep things. V'tavrulei shelo b'makom madron uv'pshia inami b'digla. He says that they broke the item that where it was not on a steep incline and it was done negligently. And b'derech tovim lifnim mishuras hadin, and there's a mitzvah to go above and beyond the letter of the law. So he says, according to Rashi, nafgalan chidush atzum, there's a huge chidush, a huge novelty. The gam heicha shahasabal pasha mamash b'malachto shuratz yoter midai, that even when the worker was clearly negligent, he ran too quickly, he went on a rough terrain. V'lo rak heicha shelo nisar lishmor atzmo. Not just that he wasn't super careful, but he was mamish negligent, right? He says the asamaisa pshia bezadon achlo bekavana lahazik, and he knew that he was going too quickly, right? He knew that he was being reckless, right? Mikol makom mitzvah la balabayis limchalo, but there's still a mitzvah for the balabayis to forgive him. Uchemoshe kosav kan harav b'dvarav. Okay. Omnam lefi mashabir hashvus Yaakov es divrei Rashi leka lamila minei la'adam yachid. However, the question is, why does the Gemara relate the story that it was a group of employees? So the shvus Yaakov if you recall the story, they were the schleppers in the plural. So why does the story relate it in that way? So according to the shvus Yaakov, in his interpretation of Rashi, he says that it's only when there's a group of workers who behave this way. He understands that the reason why you have to be more forgiving is because each worker claims that the other guy, or could claim that the other guy was the one who was the fumbler or the stumbler. And that's why we have to be more forgiving, because you don't really know which one of them was the real bumbler. Okay. Lefi dvar v'yotzei dedafka b'rabanim or zemitam shekasa. Avalim adam yachid shavar hachavis ein tzarich limchol klal. He says, but that turns out that if there was only one person driving the forklift or whatever it was, and you know clearly that it was his negligence or her negligence, so then you don't have to be moichel according to that opinion. He says, Ach, igam imlo ninkot kedivrei in Yaakov elana farshis Rashi kipshuto that filu biyachid sphere lekein. He says, but even if we don't go according to that interpretation, and we say that you have to be forgiving even when it's only one worker, mikol makom akati lanias daiti yesh litmo ala Rav Kan. Madua sasam v'kasav kain b'pshitus bisman shekama rishonim pligi al pirish Rashi v'lo sfiru kavase. He says, but I'm still a bit amazed at the Rav Shulchan Aruch, who looks at this Gemara exclusively through the lens of Rashi's interpretation. He says there are many other Rishonim who learn the Gemara completely differently. V'chein hu shitas rach, rif, muke yosef, kid'lekaman. He says, kodem navo lashon hashita mekubetzes b'shem haramach. But let's first look at the shita mekubetzes. He says that the way that the way to understand the story is that it wasn't pshia, it wasn't negligence, but rather an innocent accident. He says, in that case, that's why the Gemara says, that's why Rav told Rabbi Bar Bar Chanan that he has to be forgiving. He says, Hare mavur despirle delo karashi, ella the halifnim mishur sadin haba shemitzad ikar hadin imlo mivim raya shelo pashu chayv masham lo mol shavuasam. He says that what was the chiddush that he had to be forgiving? Not because they did anything untoward, but normally the halacha requires an employee to swear that he wasn't negligent. And what Rav was telling him is, don't make them swear, just take their word for it, and then you can let them off the hook. So that's what Rav was saying, go according to the path of the good. In other words, go beyond the letter of the law. Trust them, because you need to build trust between yourself and your employees, and therefore take their word that it was a total accident. V'chein das ha-me'iri, the me'iri holds that way as well. So now, okay, I'm just skipping through it because it's a lot of text over here. But then he says, and now let me, he says, V'shita sanamuke Yosef hu betzim shita sarvit b'shem Rabbeinu Chanan ol shevi sham b'sugya shekasav ve'echrara chaytaima basra. Let me just see. I'm sorry, I skipped it. He says, Gam hanimuke Yosef acher shevi pirish Rashi demari b'pshia kasav al zev zelashono inami v'hu yoter nachon she'elu tavru hachabis b'makom roim kaven shelo heviu raya chayavim l'shalim v'lo mitveri b'shvua. In other words, the Nemuke Yosef understands that they claim that it was totally by accident, and they have to bring proof. They have to bring evidence that they broke it by accident, and they can't. And that's where the Rav had paskin that you should trust them and not obligate them to pay. So, and that's why Rav said you have to go beyond the letter of the law. And he says, so, and there are a number of other poskim who learn that way. So when you have evidence that he broke it negligently, or he admits that he broke it negligently, according to all of these opinions, there is no mitzvah to be moichel. So, but he says, nonetheless, we do have a group of later Rishonim who do paskin like Rashi. And that's why basically he says that could be the reason why the Rav Shulchan Aruch paskins like Rashi, that even when you know he's been negligent, you should still be moichel him. Okay. Yes. Well, that's the same thing as an employee. Well, any person who's under your employ, whether it's temporarily, just for that job, or whether it's or whether he's an employee of yours. Oh, so you're saying you want to suggest that to foster ongoing relationship, right? It seems from the story of the Gemara that these were independent contractors. In the story that we have in the Gemara, it says, Anahu shakoloi, these were movers. These were people who were hired to transport. Yeah, no, I totally hear you. Look, today, professional movers are bonded. They have insurance. And
I
right.
think your car needs to be repaired and it's crashed by accident. I agree, but I mean, why should you be?
That's right. That's right. Now, let's say you hire a guy who's not bonded. He's not a professional mover, right? And you're going to pay him cash, okay? Because you want to get off on the cheap. That's where this halacha would be pertinent. You know that you want to do a chesed to this guy. He doesn't have a job, and he's a nebuch, and he needs the money, and he's not really good as a skilled laborer. So you figure you'll hire him to move your mother-in-law's dresser from her house to the condo that she's moving into. That's right. It only belongs to your mother-in-law. Right. So you say to yourself, okay, so why not? I might as well. I'll hire the guy. He wants the work. He's willing to do it. So usually it's in those kinds of situations where things end up breaking, right? We all know that. Yeah, it was an object of value. And remember, back in those days, there was no such thing as insurance. There was no thing as being bonded, right? And there was no such thing as professional training as a mover, right? It was just shakolai, that this is what they did for a living. And so, but the bottom line is that yeah, you have to weigh the scenario. When we first moved here 11 years ago, there was a guy who came to me, a frum guy, and said, I just bought a moving company. I would love the opportunity to have your business because I'm really getting started. Would you help me? He said, I'm bonded, I'm insured, yada, yada, yada. So I said, okay, if you can match the best quote that I get for the moving, which was not cheap to move from LA to Canada. So I can't tell you the tremendous aggravation. First of all, half the stuff was broken because he wasn't used to long hauls. When you're doing short city hauls, there's a certain way of packing goods in the truck. When you're going cross country, you have to pack it totally differently. And his workers didn't know what to do. He hired cheap workers who probably were not trained properly. Stuff was stolen. It was just like anything you can imagine. And then the guy that he hired to drive across the border was a convicted felon, so they wouldn't let him across the border. So that I had to meet him at the border, and then he couldn't get across the border, so I had to go back the next night. It was just a nightmare, just a nightmare. But anyway, that's what happens. Well, but it also was, I wanted to try and do a guy a favor. Yeah, from guy. It was the son of one of my congregants, and I wanted to do him a favor, but I had to end up having a conflict with him because I didn't end up paying him what I owed him because I couldn't. I said, I'm sorry, how can I possibly pay you? And in that kind of scenario, first of all, I knew his dad was wealthy, right? He had just bought this business as a startup, as one of those first ventures. His father was wealthy. I knew that he would land on his feet. He wasn't going to be destitute, right? But I figured, look, lesson learned for me, lesson learned for you. This is, I think he got out of the business a few years later and went into something else. I did a chesed. I thought I was doing a guy a nice favor. Would I do it again? I'm not sure. In other words, sometimes like in that case where you hire the guy who's not bonded, doesn't know what he's doing, and you hire him to move something that's extremely valuable, right? So sometimes you learn a lesson also, which is it pays to hire someone who's bonded and insured and has a reputation in this business, because you do need a skilled laborer to move items for you. And don't allow your desire to do chesed cloud your judgment. And perhaps this guy just because he came to me and asked me for the business, maybe I should have sat down with him and said, are you really sure you know what you're doing? And are you prepared? Have you ever done a long haul like this? Maybe I should have interviewed him a little bit more carefully because he was a kid after all. I don't know. I'm just, you always learn from those kinds of experiences. Okay.
Still in Chesed, but maybe there's a better way to do it, because at the end of the day, it would come out so well.
Right. It didn't come out well. I tried to do the chesed, and it turned out not to be a chesed, right? Because he ended up losing a lot of money from this venture.
I think what the Imrei Yaakov was saying in that question, or he still had to forgive him or not. That was what they're saying here.
Right. Well, in this situation, it wasn't a matter of forgiving him, but do I have to now pay for it? Right. So the Imrei Yaakov says, yeah, you should pay him for the work for the day, but only if you know that they're poor. So let's take a look. Mitzvah al balabayis v'chulei. So we did this already. We saw that there is a variety of opinions on this matter. Shenamar laman telech b'derech tovim, as it says that you should go along the path of the good. Dafka mitam zeh. He says it's only because of this pasuk in Mishlei that urges you to go on a good path. Aval ein kan mitzvah min haTorah mehaded arshinim behodatala es haderech begoymer asher yaso be'amrinim tezel lifnim mishur sadin. He says, but there's another pasuk that is from Parshas Yisro, which is a pasuk in the Torah in the Chumash, where it says, you shall instruct them on the pathway that they shall go. And the Gemara learns from that pasuk that a person should always try to go lifnim mishur sadin. The b'maisek kazeh sheshibru chabes basulo hepsid gadol gam mishum lifnim mishur sadin pater. He says, even with that, even you're even exempt from that biblical principle of going beyond the letter of the law, because they caused you such significant financial loss. And therefore, it's only because of this pasuk in Mishlei, which is even a weaker argument as to why you should follow this principle. So number one, look, I didn't sue them for the damages of all the items that they damaged. I could have also sued them for the damages, but I didn't. I just didn't end up paying them the last installment of what I owed them. The im anihu, and if the guy is poor, mashma de beresha le'inyan limchalo amar ki hecha she'eno ani. It sounds like there's two different levels. To charge him for the loss so that he's got to be out of pocket, that you shouldn't do, even when he damages your item. But to pay him for the day's work or for the job, you only should consider yourself exempt if the guy is poor. He mamish needs the money. Okay.
Rabbi, what about using an insurance?
Right. So as we said, I'm not sure what time you came on, but we were talking about that. When you hire a bonded insured mover, so then you can certainly use the insurance as a basis for saying, no, get it from the insurance. Why should I be out of pocket when I'm paying you a premium for your labor because of the insurance that I want to make sure that you have? So you're absolutely entitled to get covered by the insurance. Right.
But you have to make the claim. No, the transport company cannot make the claim. You have to do the claim by yourself, so the insurance can pay to you. Correct?
I'm not sure exactly how it always works. I think sometimes the insurance company, the moving company, does the claim files the claim. I don't know who files the claim in that situation. I don't know. It could also be that you could say you.
No, he's bonded, so the bonding. So if you sue him, And then he goes to the insurance company and says, pay this suit. The insurance
Yeah,
company-
I'm not sure. I don't know whether you have to actually litigate. I don't think,
bringing a claim.
right, but you have to bring a claim. I'm not sure how it works, how the paperwork works and who has to file the claim. But I seem to be under the impression that the moving company would at least facilitate the connection between their insurance company. And the injured party. Yeah. All right, we have to stop for today.
Thank you.